happy. It's a Misty Rainforest and just a passing of the turn, so it does not have a threat. Has a lot of reactive permission. You see double Forceful, double Stifle, double Wasteland.
Yeah, an odd hand. I think a fine hand to keep, but one that becomes significantly better if Daniel can find a threat card.
Or significantly worse if your opponent knows exactly what's in your hand.
This is true.
So this is a little bit interesting. Gataxian Pro providing the information. Nick's going to write it all down. He'll see that Daniel has 3 pair. Great poker hand.
It's actually not a very good poker hand. They only let you show down 5 cards.
Depends where you play.
Sure.
Ancient Tomb, the draw. It's actually a little bit difficult for Nick to kind of work his way through, right? He's going to play an Ancient Tomb, pass the turn back, and, well, that can get blown up by a Wasteland. So, Volcanic Eye on the draw. There's Wasteland to take that off the table, but Nick might just be saying, I need to get past that point in the game.
Yep.
Looks like Emrakul was the draw step. There's a Scalding Tarn, pass the turn back. Misty Rainforest the draw here for Daniel. Covered a lot of this match over the past couple of years. It's so important for Team Redelver to have a threat to get started with.
Even with 2 copies of Force of Will, you can only really hold off this deck for so long. The Stifle does complicate matters because it means that Nick can't fire off a cantrip here until Daniel puts his shields down to the mana, which he probably doesn't have to at this point because he's drawn more than enough lands to function.
Ancient Tomb the draw, pass the turn back, Spell Pierce the draw here for Daniel. There's a Wasteland to take care of the Ancient Tomb. That'll work. So Nick is crossing cards off the list. Spell Pierce the draw here for him. I think he may have had the opportunity to maybe lead out with a City of Traders there on one of the previous turns and see if Daniel would Wasteland it.
There's a risk there, which is Daniel says, okay, you have a City of Traders, and the following turn, Nick probably has to discard a hand size, at which point he's in all sorts of trouble.
Wooded Foothills pass the turn back. It's an odd game as there's a Griselbrand.
I think Nick's just going to have to start discarding here. He can't pull the trigger on this Scalding Tarn. He's got to wait for a second land. I mean, there's a second Stifle in hand, in fact, so he needs to wait until he finds an island.
Yep, it's time to discard. I like discarding Emrakul. Yeah. Shuffle some of those lands back in. Shuffle Gataxian Pro back in. I'd say okay. So Nick ups his chances of drawing some more lands here, but he is looking for a card like Basic Island. That's a big draw step. He was able to find it. Daniel going to draw a card. It's a Lightning Bolt.
He really can't start playing until he finds one. A Volcanic would also be fine because he's gotten through Daniel's Wastelands, but...
Daniel, no threats, no cantrips yet. Force of Will to draw here for Nick.
And in that respect, he's drawing pretty slim, honestly. The second Stifle cuts off fetch lands, which means we're looking at 3 islands, a mountain, which really doesn't facilitate very much, and 3 volcanic islands. So only 7 draw steps in the deck.
A Lightning Bolt's going to go upstairs here. Let's see what Nick wants to discard. I'm guessing it might be the fire. She's going to go with a Brainstorm. Oh, quick update for you guys here. Jesse Inman's not messing around. He's up a game already with Reanimator. So Will Fleischman has some real work to do. That's for sure.
And this is another awkward draw here. It's a Flooded Strand.
Ugh.
And he can't really tap the City of Traders and then try to do something with the 2 fetch lands because they both get hit by Stifle.
Sure.
So... yeah, Nick just has to say go again.
Yeah, just let it go. There's a Gataxian Probe. Well, let's get some info. Here's the grip. You got a Fire Ice, a Force of Will, Spell Pierce, a Ponder, Show and Tell, Sneak Attack, and a Griselbrand. Well, clearly a good hand, but if he's not playing any lands, of course it's going to be a good hand.
Yeah, it's, well, and not only is he not playing lands, but he can't generate mana either as long as those 2 Stifles are up. So it feels like if Daniel's able to find a threat card very quickly here, it's going to be extremely challenging for Nick to cobble together enough of anything to really threaten Daniel this game. And as if on cue,
Delver's Secrets. Finally, a threat has arrived. Took a little while, but it got here.
and I think that might have been a misstep by Nick. I think at that point he may want to use a Force of Will there on the Delver for a couple of reasons. One is he's about to discard a hand size anyway, so getting some of the cards out of the hand may be good for a variety of reasons. The second issue here is once Daniel gets something into play, Nick is compelled to play into all of these Stifles and Force of Wills. As long as he's under no pressure, he has time to draw out of it. And this is the consequence. Now this is happening. He has to try to crack his fetch lands to do something, plays into the Stifle. There's still Force of Wills left over in Daniel's hand. And Nick may be left with no mana discarding to hand size.
I think you might have to force one of these Stifles.
But if this was going to happen, I would have preferred to use the Stifle on the Delver of Secrets.
Sure.
Because Nick may have the opportunity to just draw some lands and start casting stuff.
There's drop. Yep, there's the other Stifle. And now here's Force of Will on Stifle. Daniel is going to say sacrifice this, and now we started one heck of a chain reaction. That's what's happened here.
So this probably would have ended up being the same in the end of the day.
Perhaps.
The Force of Will probably would have gotten spell pierced by Daniel, but I think Nick needed to at least try to pick a fight last turn over this.
So now it'll be spell pierce. That's up next. So there goes Force of Will. Okie dokie. We're all clear. And flipping. So now Insectile Aberration is here. Draw probe. Let's get to work.
This has got to be the Delver player's fantasy is an Insectile Aberration, a Force of Will in hand with another blue card, and an opponent with no permanence.
This is the dream.
This is the dream, right?
This is the dream realized.
Daniel's living it right now.
Yeah. There's the City of Traders.
He got a permanent in play. Now Daniel's probably frustrated. He's going to look for a wasteland.
Yeah. Well, if you take a look at Nick's life total, he doesn't have to look for much. It's only going to take a couple more turns now. He's down to 6. Pass the turn back with the ability to hard cast a Force of Will and alternate cast a Force of Will. Lotus Petal was the draw. Nick hoping Daniel doesn't have that much permission, but he knows that he does. He saw his hand a little bit earlier with Taxian Probe, so he knows about the 2 Force of Wills. Thumbs up there for the Lotus Petal.
But Nick has no capacity to fight a counter war.
Nah, not at all. He's just got to try to push through and do things he doesn't want to do. He's not going to even try anything just yet. Looks like he's going to go for fire. Some fire and ice. Deal 2 damage to this thing.
I don't mind using the Fire Ice here because this probably is good enough to induce a counter spell.
Yeah, and I would
without being an essential piece.
And I would want to fight over it if I'm Daniel. I want to keep my threat 'cause I'm 2 turns away from winning. And I know my opponent's pretty weak. Like, they can't do a lot, right? City of Traders is out there. It doesn't even have any colored mana besides that. Has to be able to peel land to even start. I do admit I like to get aggressive in situations like this, but I think this is a time to actually get aggressive given that this game can just be over in 2 turns.
Yeah. I just don't think you want Nick to draw out of it. That was the same reason that I wanted Nick to Force a Will the Delver Secrets in the first place.
Sure.
Nick needs time. He's got some tools in his hand, but he's short on mana and he's short on time. And if this game gets into a draw go scenario, it has to favor Nick.
For what it's worth, I think I like alternate casting cost on Force Will, removing a Taxian Probe, and leaving up the mana in case I just draw something. So I think he's going to just sacrifice the fetch land, pay 5 mana, and counter. And I think I would want to do alternate casting cost here. Though he does have a land in his hand, but he's going to go with just the hard cast of Force of Will. It's a pretty close decision, I think.
Yeah.
Draw a card. Nimble Mongoose. Attack for 3. Yeah, sacrifice his calling turn, go get a Trop, because I would certainly play this Mongoose as well. There's almost no reason not to.
Yep.
There's the Trop.
Nick does have an Echoing Truth in his deck. This little Mongoose locks that out.
Take a draw. Nick find what he's looking for. We're going to find out momentarily. There's 2 mana. He's already reaching. Yep, so there's Scalding Tarn. Sacrifice that, go down to 2. Daniel wants to check to make sure. Yeah, okay, I still have Force of Will plus blue card.
Yep.
Just want to make sure. There's a Volcanic.
Natural there to gasp a little bit, but
Yeah.
Daniel checking. Things look okay.
Show and tell? No? Thank you? That's going to do it. Daniel Olivieri is going to win game number 1 here with Teamer Delver. He's up a game over Sneak and Show.
Perfect. No cards in hand. Opponent dead.
Yep.
Still with resources left over in their hand.
Just like you drew it up.
Exactly.
Back to the booth we come. It is trivia time. Rules here. Question there. It's pretty simple. Hashtag SCG Premium on Twitter. Make sure you're following at SCG Live. Patrick will have a 6-month question for you. And we'll announce the winner and the answer to that question at the conclusion of our semifinal round, which is moving along pretty quickly here. And of course, all giveaways here on SCG Live are the sole discretion of Star City Games. In no way are our contests or giveaways affiliated with Twitch.tv, though we do thank them for allowing us to broadcast on their fantastic network.
Absolutely. So Nick's Sneak and Show deck's got some spice in it. A couple one-ofs. A Dig Through Time, there's a natural card to play. 1 copy of, maybe 2 supposed to be in the list. An Echoing Truth for a little bit of disruption and utility. And then a split card we really haven't seen in this deck before from Apocalypse. Can you name that split card?
And we think you can. Use that hashtag. Hashtag SCG Premium. Make sure you're following at SCG Live, and we will announce the winner at the conclusion of our semifinal round. Back to the match we're going to go. We will take a look at the sideboards here, and we will see that Nick Loiacano does have 2 defense grids, 2 copies of Gravedigger's Cage, 2 Blood Moon, a Pyroblast, a Red Blast, 2 copies of Through the Breach, 3 Pyroclasms, a Shattering Spree, and Buseju, who shelters them all.
If anything, there's too many cards to bring in here. I think some of the anti-counterspell measures are good to bring in because most of Daniel's interaction is going to be that sort of stuff. So the Buseju and the 2 copies of Defense Grid make a lot of sense. I like bringing in the Red Blast, just more efficient answers to the various counterspells that Daniel's bringing to the table. And the 2 copies of Blood Moon as well. Teamer Delver is a deck with no basic lands in it. Blood Moon says you can only play with what you have, plus you can cast some red spells for the remainder of the game. Teamer Delver can be fast enough where Blood Moon can be too slow, but I think on the play it's worth bringing in.
Other side of things, 2 Gravedigger's Cages, a Needle, a True Nemesis, a Sulfuric Vortex, Ancient Grudge, Flusterstorm, Crow's Grip, 3 copies of Pyroblast, 2 Submerge, and 2 copies of Rough Tumble.
So I really like the 3 copies of Pyroblast. Nick's got plenty of blue cards. And the copy of Pithy Needle can do some work against Sneak Attack, as can the copy of Crow's Grip. Not always the best card to bring in, but often against Teamer Delver, Sneak and Show is in a position where they have to cast Sneak Attack and hope to get to the next turn because they don't have enough mana to do everything at once. So Crow's Grip can be really good there. I think the Flusterstorm is another reasonable counterspell.
Well, we'll see. I mean, it's funny because, this is a matchup that we used to cover a lot Concertar Kieran contest actually hasn't been out that long, but it's been a while since we've seen this.
It just feels like when cons became legal, it became a new format.
Yeah.
Monastery, Swift Sphere to a lesser degree, but primarily the Delves draw cards. Treasure Cruise, Dig Through Time, they just really altered the format.
They have changed quite a few things, but it's made the format different and robust.
It has. It does slot into a lot of the same decks, and Containment Priest, that's another card that got printed recently, has a lot of influence on Legacy. A lot of the cards that they printed recently slot into the pre-existing decks of the format. Containment Priest, True Name Nemesis, these are the Commander cards that got printed recently that really shook up the format. Those slot in pretty naturally into Stoneforge / Blue Tempo decks.
Yeah.
And Treasure Cruise and Dig Through Time is much the same. So I hope the next wave of printings, whenever they do influence the format, if they can find ways to improve the other decks of the format, I think that'd be great. Because most of the new Legacy content that's been printed recently has influenced kind of the same stuff.
Hey, I wouldn't mind some help.
A goblin.
Anything.
A halfway decent goblin.
I'll take a new card for Death and Taxes. I guess I got Containment Priest. That's probably not fair. And Spirit of Labyrinth. But those cards haven't had a really huge impact on that deck. They've been fine.
I think Containment Priest is very, very good. I think it's, in fact, good enough where I'm considering splashing it in Burn. Because it cleans up so many of the disaster matchups.
Sure.
Reanimator, Sneak and Show. They get a lot better once you have Containment Priest in your deck.
I'm going to have to... If I play Reanimator next week, and I'm going to have to prepare for Containment Priest. Forgot about that.
Chained to the Rocks you can also play.
You're serious?
Some options.
There's no way you would play that.
You can Deflecting Palm, a Merit Age token.
Well, that now you're speaking my language.
Mm-hmm.
Teach my lesson. That'd be a delight. That'd be a good way to get them.
The problem is that most of those decks play Mazavith, so if they're careful about it, it doesn't come up.
Yeah, that's true.
But you get them once. If it's the first time in their life they've ever played against Deflecting Palm, you get them.
Boom. Deflecting Palm seems a little bit of a reach.
Boros Charm, probably an upgrade over Flame Rift.
Nah, see, that's the charm of Flame Rift.
I know.
Though, is that,
I know that's the thing.
Yeah, you got to show them who you are, which I don't care.
Psychic happiness. That's
Yeah.
the value of Flame Rift. I'm
Yeah.
happier when I'm casting that card.
Get a little taste of this. I'm mad that you have Flame Rift in your sideboard now.
Comes in against opponents with life totals, I guess.
It's my kind of Magic card right there. I wonder if they'll ever print an effect like that again, and how aggressively they can push it. It's like 3 deal 8.
There's
That's
just
probably
not
too good.
There's just not a lot to be gained by printing those kind of cards. Flame Rift is the type of card where, is it good enough to play in a standard format? Maybe yes, maybe no. But if it is in decks, it's probably for the wrong reasons.
Okay.
And it's at a rate where it's realistic for it to show up in a standard level format.
Sure. Some sort of very aggressive red deck.
Or just, it leads to play patterns where people don't get to interact and they die too quickly.
All right. A good argument.
If Flame Rift was equal in standard right now, it certainly would not be the most powerful card by a mile. It might not even show up in decks, but it's a bad risk to print.
In defense of Flame Rift. That's where we are now. I love it. Nemesis?
Yes.
Yeah.
One of Magic's all-time worst sets.
What's the best card from that set? Like Sap Burst, I think?
I don't know about in terms of standard level play. Like if you were to reprint the set in standard, what would be the most played card? Probably Parallax Wave.
Ah,
That card,
nice.
Parallax Tide also.
Those cards were nice.
Yeah.
Each color had like a Parallax, right? Like Sapling Burst doesn't have the title Parallax,
No,
but
Parallax
it's a Parallax
Wave, Parallax Tide, Parallax Nexus.
That's the black
one.
one?
Yeah, discard their hand. But yeah, that Nemesis is the meat on the poop sandwich that is Mercadian Masks block. With Mercadian Masks and Prophecy as the bread.
Well, tell us how you really
dark
feel.
A dark time for Magic.
Tell us how you really feel about those sets. It looks like Nick is happy with his 6. Daniel kept his 7 pretty quickly.
No one liked those sets. No one at any point in Magic has ever liked those sets.
Your chances of working at R&D are lowering by the sentence.
No, R&D would admit the same thing. R&D would absolutely admit the same thing. If they wouldn't, they're lying.
Here's a basic island. Our backup match, the other semifinal match, headed to game number 3 here, as Will Fleischman was able to tie things up. Blue-Red, Delver, and Reanimator. Heading for a final game. Here's a Ponder.
And that's a common story, too. Reanimator, very favored game 1. Post-board, a lot of these Delver decks, even if they don't have specific graveyard hate, they have enough Fluster Storm type of cards to bring in to have a puncher's chance.
Oh, Ponder's unresolving. Pass that turn back. We'll go Daniel's way. He'll draw a copy of Wasteland. You see a hand of 2 Force Wolves. There's also an Nimble Mongoose over there. Gataxian Probe 2.
Things already going better for Nick because he has a source of mana he's going to be able to keep in play for the whole game.
Impressive.
Good start.
Island, Brainstorm, City of Traders, Ponder, and a Flooded Strand. So he's got a lot of cantripping to do.
Not a lot of information to be gleaned from that hand.
No, not at all. My hand could become anything. See, Daniel's going to write down this information. Make sure he knows exactly what Nick is up to. As you mentioned, not a lot of information to glean from this hand. Force of Will to draw. There's 3 of those in his hand now. What he needs is a green source to get that Nimble Mongoose out there, and I don't think he has one. Looks like he might, though.
Yeah, I thought he had a turn.
All right, there it is. Get himself a Tropical Island. Get those beats going.
Now, Daze is also from Nemesis. Very good card, but that's more of a consequence of the format sort of thing. I think that if you reprinted Nemesis in standard right now, or in a random standard format, that Parallax Wave would get the most play.
That's my kind of Magic card.
That card's super good.
Yeah. There's no Mongoose. We'll go back Nick's way. Nick will draw. Flooded Strand. And there's a Brainstorm.
Probably not a Force of Will worthy card at this point. I think Daniel showed a lot of discipline last game with his Force of Wills. Just waiting to get combo pieces with it, not going to fight over the cantrips. Although Nick's hand's a little soft. Of the types of hands where you would consider using a Force of Will in the Brainstorm, Nick showed one of those last turn.
Yeah, I don't think you're in much of a rush. Just hold steady. Couple of cards going to go back here. And of course, has a fetch land in play to make it a perfect Brainstorm. Oh, there that goes. So a much different game than what we saw in the previous one.
Yeah, Nick's got 2 lands in play. And he's cast a couple spells.
Yeah.
Doing much better.
That's impressive stuff, yeah. Now those are, I just want to confirm, those are Beta Islands?
No, I believe those are Japanese 4th edition.
Okay.
But I am not 100% on that.
All right.
The foreign language cards that came around 4th edition are kind of a blur to me.
Here's a Ponder.
Because back when they got printed, I didn't buy Japanese cards. And then after that point, I didn't really care too much.
Ah, sure, sure.
I was never really into the foreign language cards much myself.
Back in the day, I had a simplified Chinese blue-green madness deck.
Wow.
Yeah. All that high school work. I don't have a single one of the cards.
Eventually pawned off for gas money to go to a PTQ, I'm guessing.
That's very likely, yeah. Yeah. Attack for 1. Probably didn't even get close to winning that PTQ either.
No, probably, yeah.
That's a 4th Force of Will. That's pretty neat.
Well, it's nice, but I'm sure Daniel would prefer something proactive at this point.
Well, he's got this creature in play, so.
Just things to fill up his graveyard would be really helpful at this point.
Sure. Sacrifice a Scalding Tarn here. Brainstorm in response.
Someone's digging for stifles.
That's what it feels like to me, too. See if Nick lets this resolve. There's a Spell Pierce. Well, interesting little fight we have here. So now the fetch will resolve. See what land he wants to search up. He can go basic hunting if he'd like. Looks like he will.
Yeah, got the one mountain on the list. Don't see it all the time.
Yeah, camps are very split on that mountain. Some people really like it. Some people extremely disliked it extremely, excuse me.
I'm more towards the second camp.
I think it causes a lot of trouble.
I'm worried. I'd be worried about drawing it. It's nice to fetch for.
Here's a ponder.
But in spots like this, you know, where you've made a couple land drops and you have the option to fetch for it, it's great.
See the hand, there's a Brainstorm of City of Traders. A sneak attack in there too there for Nick. I'm just trying to figure out what he wants to do with his ponder. Always a difficult card to resolve.
He's got to be a little troubled by the fact that Daniel's over there not really doing anything.
I wouldn't feel great. Red Blast is the card that he's drawn. Pass the turn back. Daniel going to untap. He's got 3 cards in the graveyard. Day is the draw. There's a Wasteland. Here are the beats. The hand is 4 copies of Force of Will and a Daze here for Daniel. And he doesn't need to do all that much besides get that No Mongoose up to threshold. So then it turns into a real clock and then forces action from Nick. Any cantrip effect is likely to be a good one. That's a Brainstorm. It's good to go. So 3 cards coming. 2 cards going to go back here for Nick.
And I think he has found an Emrakul, which means he has the second piece of the puzzle. He was missing that for a little bit.
It's really about all it's missing.
Well, you know, and the ability to push through Force of Wills.
Well, we'll get there. I think that we're just going to work ourselves into test spell territory, right? Where it's just keep casting them,
yeah,
and hope one resolves. I think that's really all that you can do. I think that might just be the part of the game that we're at. There's Ponder now too.
And Sneak and Show doesn't need to push through everything in one turn. That's kind of the advantage of playing a deck like this versus something like Storm. Nick can just cast a lethal spell.
Yep.
Requires a counter spell.
If one of them resolves, that's it. That's some of the appeal of this deck.
So he doesn't need to set up a hand that goes over the top. He can just, over the course of several turns, push it through.
Pass a turn back. Daniel's draw. What does he find? A Tarn. That can be card number 4 in the graveyard. And if he gets real creative, he can wasteland his own land for cards 5 and 6. Which, given his hand, if I was over there, I would consider that play once I'm able to get to card number 7.
I agree. And you can see why the cantrips are so important for this teamer deck. Daniel's doing fine. He's drawn good cards, but he's not really pushing an advantage right now. And Nick has just drawn Blood Moon, which is excellent here because this is probably qualifies as a test spell, probably warrants a response from Daniel. And if it doesn't resolve, great. It's not even an essential piece.
There's City of Traders. Yeah, I think we're going to see a little Blood Moon action now. This is the ultimate test spell, as you did mention. It is really, really interesting, too, because there is a line of play that exists here that is just so off the wall and ridiculous, which is just sack your Tarn, like search for a land, don't search for a land, whatever. Wasteland yourself and say, Blood Moon resolves.
Yes.
6 cards in my graveyard. I want to keep Daze in my hand so that I have Force of Will plus blue card, Force of Will plus blue card. Oh, hopefully I will discard something, but, you know, this is the kind of test spell where it's very scary, but I'm not entirely sure that you actually have to care about it.
Daniel can opt out. I agree. But I think the fact that it cuts off so many of his draws and the Daze in his hand is getting close to worthless means that this is a fine spell to Force of Will.
The Daze in his hand says blue card to remove to Force of Will.
Yeah.
It has no other text if you choose to play the game that way. And I also think that we're getting to the point where that's just the text on the card anyway, as he's just drawn another one.
Now, the play you alluded to before of sack my tar and wasteland myself, I think is legitimate. I think I would have done this turn because he doesn't need the 3rd or 4th mana, and getting that clock up is so important. He still has double Force Will back up. I suppose if he's worried that Nick has Spell Pierces as his disruption, he wants to keep some of his lands in play, but if I'm Daniel, I'm not really comfortable with how this game is shaping up right now, even though he's drawn a lot of counterspells.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, that's what I'd be scared of is I've drawn a lot of counterspells. It's here show and tell, but I'm not like putting enough pressure on my opponent, and I know playing against this deck where if they get to do their thing, so he's going to remove days, I'm not feeling great. And do you give them more time to just find what they're looking for, like a card like Red Elemental Blast? As here's Force, removing Force. So now for Nick, so that's 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's 4 Force of Wills. So my show and tell's been countered past the turn back, but now you're empty-handed. You do have Threshold, so that's good. But it's a crazy line to take, you know, sacking your tar and getting land in the wasteland yourself, but I think it may be appropriate given what the composition of his hand looked like. There's a Brainstorm finally.
Although he can take a slightly more conservative route this turn and just wasteland the City of Traders, get to Threshold.
Push you to 10, pass. Only cast Brainstorm if you need to.
Well, I think there's an argument for doing it that turn just to find action.
Sure. Maybe find a card like a Ponder, who knows?
Days.
Yeah.
Or something proactive here, a Tarmogoyf, just something to do.
There's a Lotus Petal. It looks like it's time to try to resolve a sneak attack. Here's a Brainstorm response. Let's see if he can find an answer. So he gets to draw 3 of them. And he's going to get to put 2 back.
He found the Crozan Grip.
I would keep that one.
And this is the exact scenario I mentioned here of sometimes sneak is show in this matchup because Temur Delver is so good at cutting off your mana. You had to play the sneak attack here and just hope that it gets to the next turn with no red mana up.
Yep.
And that's exactly what's happened.
In fact, to fetch on his upkeep so that he doesn't draw any of those other lands that he put back. So the top card will be a mystery after he gets done searching and shuffling. And for Nick, he's going to lose that sneak attack here in just a moment.
That was the ideal draw.
Yep. Remember our backup match right now. Jesse Inman playing Reanimator, #1 overall seed, and Daniel Villamizer, number 5. Excuse me, I take that back. Will Fleischman, my apologies, number 4 overall seed, playing Blue Red Delver. They're in game number 3. The draw is a Spell Pierce, big draw. There's a Grip.
And that's
for 3.
Heartbreaking for Nick because now he needs to find show and tell very quickly.
Yeah, it's this turn. There's a land. All he can do is pass back. Big fade there from Daniel. He gets in. He drew a copy of Stifle, puts you down to 4. Another draw. City of Traders. Pass. Daniel will draw. It's a Delver Secrets. In. Puts you to 1. I like playing the Delver here, but he's just going to pass the turn back. Take a draw.
Yeah, I think that I like getting the Delver in there because it allows you to beat a show and tell that puts Emrakul into play. Yep. You have a second attacker.
Gataxian Probe here. You've got a Delver, a Stifle, Spell Pierce. Take a draw. And that is going to do it. Daniel Olivieri is going to win this match here with Temur Delver, and he is moving on with his old school approach to Legacy. No treasure cruises necessary. Temur Delver on to the finals.
Nimblebongo's doing some work the whole way. Daniel there, even though his draw looked exceptional, in my mind it really wasn't. I think if he found more cantrips, he would have been able to easily defeat Nick. That said, he was able to barely hold on. And again, another Temur Delver game where the deck has basically no resources at the end and barely crosses the finish line.